name's Jonny Gracie and I represent Junkyard Bass Guitars. It's an idea to basically make a vintage bass guitar affordable to everybody. I've been playing bass guitar for about 30 years and I've always struggled to get that vintage right instrument for me at an affordable price. Well, it all started, funny enough, 20 years ago with this bass here. And this is the one, this is where it all started, the Junkyard Bass. Older body, active EQ. Had a different neck on it back then. Sold the bass in the period of 10 years afterwards. Started using jazz bass guitars, fell in love with the neck. Always missed the sound of this, managed to buy this bass back, altered the neck to a jazz bass, and Junkyard was born really there. Since then it's gone through various modifications. Hip shot detuner, active EQ, obviously a main makeover, 35 light gauge strings, vintage tuners, and just an overall vintage look and a great feel to the neck. I'm buying new necks and bodies in, and I'm tailoring them to feel like a vintage instrument, look like a vintage instrument. I'm using original vintage parts, i.e. pickups, control knobs, pots, wiring, vintage capacitors, creating that vintage tone, but with a more modern feel for the modern player, so they don't weigh too much, they don't break your neck after an hour on stage playing with them. They feel modern, they've a good balance, they've a good weight, and with a great tone. Okay, well basically, like I said earlier, I source good necks, whatever the age really. First basic checks, truss rods working, aligned properly, nice wood, good finish, and then I take them one step further by rolling all the fingerboard edges, as you can see. Staining them, vintage amber tints on them, all nitrocellulose. This one's actually got clay dot markers, vintage, made out of clay, which is a process of drilling the existing plastic ones out. I've got a jig where I bake the clay. It's oven baked for an hour, and then they're replaced into the existing holes. These ones have been amber nitroed as well to give that vintage look and feel. And I've got to say, a great vintage feel neck. Some of my necks will have the truss rod at the heel, some of them will have the truss rod at the top. Regardless, all great feel necks. They all feel great and they all sound good. Okay, you can go into a boutique in London and pay £2,000 up for a vintage bass, whatever the make. My vintage basses start from £450 and currently go to £850. So although that's a lot less markup, you're getting the same tone, the same electronics, passive or active, for a lot less, and hand finished. With features like clay dot markers, rolled fingerboard edges, all the stuff that was taking time back in the day that nowadays you don't seem to see so much. I'm going back to those traditional techniques. The main outlet for Junkyard Bass Guitars is Courtyard Music here at Sidey Big in Bromsgrove. Early days yet, but we're just starting off. There'll be a web page firing up soon as well. Got our first endorsee as well, Dino Bass from Brothers Groove. So things are on the up. It's going very well.
My name's Dino. I play in a band called Brothers Groove. I'd say since I was about 13, 14. I'm 27 now. It's just the vintage feel, vintage tones. It feels like a proper late 50s, 60s bass guitar. Something new and boutique. I've found it's all electronics and no tone wood. It's just almost synthy. Sounds like a synth sound. It needs too much preamps and not enough actual wood. I mean, this feels like it's just come from a spaceship from the 50s. The album's going great, play the game. You can buy it online, folks. The bass is built for me. It's just 2 stack pots there, so you've got 2 volumes, 2 tones, 1 for each pickup. Like very similar to this, but it's just the old stack pot, and you've got the earth strip there, just like this one as well. They're just great. I love them.
Well, basically, in the stack jazz bass that I'm building, stack meaning concentric stack pots, and here we have the pots in question. 2 CTS stack pots, potentiometers, 2 orange drop capacitors, switchgraph jack, Teflon covered wire. Produces a great tone. The problem was in the 60, 62 era, the bass amps at the time weren't particularly great. So the tone caps, the paper in oil canisters they used to be known as, were kind of bass heavy to compensate for the lack of amps really, or the poor quality amps. What I've done is I've changed the capacitors to 70s type capacitors. So they're more fruity, more funky, bring the tones out in the wood I find, and a winning combination with the stack pots. Okay, as well as the vintage range, what I've tried to incorporate is also the active side of things. This bass right here, 30-year-old elder body, maple neck, rosewood board, block markers of course, matching headstock. I wanted something that I got the vintage looks, but this time with the active sound, that boosted preamp. Again, wanted to make the bass look retro. Handmade scratch plate I made for this. It's got a Tone Monster 3-band EQ, master volume, blend pot, back pickup, front pickup. Then we've got bass, middle and treb. On the bass, centre detent plus 12, centre detent minus 12 dB. So there's plenty of boost there. Same with the mid, centre detent plus 12, minus 12. Same with the treble, centre plus 12, minus 12. So just give you a little play, a little quick demo of that. Great bluesy tone. This time we're going to put the selector on the front pickup. Still flat EQ. Okay, so this is where the magic happens. You can wind the bass up, plus 12, take the middle and the treble out, almost double bass like tones. Well, there you have it. That's Junkyard Bass Guitars. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. You can find me on Facebook, Junkyard Bass Guitars. Also, we're stocking at Courtyard Music in Tideby in Bromsgrove. Feel free to get in touch and feel the difference.